When we talk about the races of people forming the African continent, I know most of the people will not go deep into the dialogue, as many will just all of a sudden talk about blacks and Arabs and maybe Asians, such as Indians, forgetting that there are also whites of Africa, as this world is, and there's been about moving and settling of different groups of people from one place to the other. It is the same for the whites, who are known majorly to be great journeymen, forming undeniable history of sailing to different parts of the world thousands of years ago, where they left a significant mark in terms of Western culture, including religion and other things. You may call them good or bad if you want. In this video, the focus is on the white people of Africa, so if you ever wanted to come across this video, you shouldn't scroll down without watching, liking, and also subscribe for more videos, and please the like and subscribe buttons are free. When I talk about the whites of Africa, I mean those people who trace their origin or ancestry to most especially Europe in countries such as Netherlands, Portugal, Britain, Germany, and also France, among others. These people, who are scattered in a number of African countries, they are the great-great-grandsons and daughters, and even more than that, of the early white settlers in Africa, most especially South Africa, where their significance is felt up to date. When I talk about the significance of whites in South Africa, a number of questions come through, as how significant are whites in South Africa compared to other African countries? What impact is seen in South Africa ever since their ancestors stepped a foot on this sub-Saharan African country? Those questions are not hard at all to answer, as the movement and settlement of early whites in South Africa is traced way back in 1488, when a Portuguese explorer by the names of Bartolomeu Dias arrived at the southern tip of South Africa and named it Cape of Storms. This name was later changed to Cape of Good Hope by John II of Portugal due to ease of movement to the Dutch East Indies, which is the present-day Indonesia, but in the late 16th century, through the Dutch East Indian Company under renowned journeyman Jan van Riebeek, marked the start of establishment of Dutch, who first utilized the Cape of Good Hope as a resting place on their way to Dutch East Indies, and later started to permanently settle there, building storage facilities, farming among others, in order to resupply ships. Together with the Dutch farmers, a number of immigrants also started to come from other European countries, such as Germany, France, among others, where some were seeking refuge from their countries and others were workers for the Dutch East Indian Company. This led to creation of the renowned South African language by the names of Afrikaans, a West Germanic language which includes Dutch vernacular of Holland dialect, hence formation of Afrikaners community in South Africa's Cape Colony, or simply Boers practicing farming. This established community of Afrikaners continued to enjoy Cape Colony until the arrival of British colonialists in 1790s, who never wanted to let France take it. After feeling pressurized by the British colonialists due to high taxes which were being levied on them, abolition of slavery, which meant that they had to set slaves they were using free, and forcing Anglican religion onto them, the Boers called it quits from Cape Colony in what was known as the Great Trek in 1830s. While trying to establish themselves in their new place, that is the interior of South Africa, the Boers, or simply Afrikaners, faced wars with fierce Zulu kingdom in what was known as the Blood River Battle in 1838. After all the struggles, the Boers established themselves in the interior of South Africa, in areas such as Natal Republic, Orange Free State and Transvaal, from where the British later followed, trying to expand the Cape Colony to the interior. The British continued their annexation, or simply taking over of the states the Boers had established in mid and late 1800s, which triggered wars between the British and the Boers. Later in early 1900s, after going through all the struggles, the Boers surrendered to the British through treaties such as Vereeniging Treaty and turned into Afrikaners practicing nationalism through politics. Through constitutional convention between 1908 and 1909, a single South Africa Republic emerged from the combined states, which composed of Afrikaners as top politicians and dominant population of South Africa's economic and political matters. From 1910 up to 1994, when multiracial elections were held, which saw Nelson Mandela being elected as first black president of South Africa. Even though whites, or simply Afrikaners, are no longer too much active in politics of South Africa, their economic influence is quite significant in the country. Today, the white people of South Africa are over 4.6 million, from which over 60% speak
in Suid-Afrika. Suid-Afrika is 'n baie interessante land,
and about 40% speak English. White people are also found in other South African countries, such as in Namibia, where Afrikaners' population range between 60,000 to 120,000. The dominance of all the white people in that country, the whites, majorly Boers or Afrikaners, started their establishment in Namibia, then being known as Southwest Africa, in the early 19th century, escaping the British colonialists. They started to utilize Namibia's available land for farming and tapping mineral resources. Between 1913 and 1936, the white population had increased significantly in Namibia. Today, white Namibians, more especially Afrikaners, are seen being top businessmen, farmers, even topping charts as richest men, plus others in sports, in this southern African country. Another southern African country with white population is Botswana, which first received whites, mainly Afrikaners, who arrived as traders and ivory hunters from Cape of Good Hope in 1815. The whites, while establishing themselves in Botswana, faced some challenges, such as battles with Swana people in mid-1800s, more especially in 1852, which led to a treaty between Transvaal's president, Paul Kruger, with Swana chief, Sechley I, in order to end these wars. Today, Gonzi, Botswana, is home to a large number of whites, more especially Afrikaners. Without forgetting Zimbabwe, the significance of whites in this southern African country can't be left out, being mostly English-speaking descendants of early British settlers in then what was known as Southern Rhodesia, plus a small community of Afrikaners, Greeks and Portuguese. The current population of whites in Zimbabwe is about 34,111 people. Settlement of whites in Zimbabwe, being initiated by the British South Africa Company from the 1890s, under which the white settlers were in search of mineral resources such as gold. They were surprised with the moderate climate of Zimbabwe being on a plateau. This favorable climate, added to the availability of reliable prime land for farming, more especially commercial agriculture, which the whites significantly utilized with great benefit, with over 40% of the country's farmland owned by white farmers until when Zimbabwe gained independence in 1980 under Robert Mugabe. Whites are also found in other regions of Africa, such as East Africa, where around 0.1% of people in Kenya are whites, most especially British, and others being Italian, Greek among others, totaling to over 42,868 people. Long ago, the coastal regions of East Africa were fundamental in eastern trade routes, where Mombasa port became so strategic for ivory and slave trade. The whites, mainly Portuguese, had established themselves along the East African coast between 1498 and 1698, until when the Oman Arabs took over. As years had passed, another presence of Europeans in East Africa was seen in mid-1800s, when European missionaries and explorers entered East Africa. These were followed by colonialists who led to the rise of imperialism in the late 19th century, in which the renowned Uganda railway line was constructed to cater for goods from East Africa. After the first Land Regulations Act had been signed in 1897, whites started settling in the White Highlands region from 1902 under Sir Charles Eliot, then the British Commissioner of the East African Protectorate. These white settlers included Boers who arrived from South Africa, among others, who saw Kenya being made a crown colony in 1920 until 1962, when the British set Kenya free from imperialism. After a number of struggles with Africans, such as Mawu Mawu Rebellion, among others. Known as Italian Ethiopians. Since 1st June 1936, Italian Ethiopia came into presence due to a number of Italians who had started to call Ethiopia their new home after the conquest of Abyssinia. Since 1st June 1936, Italian Ethiopia was part of the newly created Italian East Africa, consisting of countries such as Ethiopia itself, Eritrea, and Somaliland. Today, over 1,400 Italian Ethiopians, including 2,000 descendants, reside significantly in Addis Ababa. In Eritrea, the first Italian settlers arrived in 1880 after the scramble for Africa. Today, the significance of Italian architecture is observed clearly in Eritrea, due to a number of structures which were constructed by Italians in the country, such as more especially churches. North Africa is mostly known for being colonized by France. Other European people reside in a number of North African countries.